Well, hey, you are watching the video version of the Marketing Should Be Fun podcast. It's so good to have you here. You can find this show on any of your favorite podcast platforms. There's the art, looks like that. You got Apple Podcasts, you got Spotify, you got all the rest. Anywhere you want to find it, you can check it out. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Well, welcome back to Marketing Should Be Fun. My name's Austin Savage. I'm here with my good friend and business partner, Kelsey Zarko. Kelsey, hello. Welcome back to Marketing Should Be Fun.
Thank you. It's been so long.
It always does feel like it, but it's just every episode I'm excited about it because
me too.
It's kind of a nice break from our just normal rhythm in business where we just get to talk and be slightly stupid for just a little bit and also just slightly knowledgeable for a little bit. So
it's a good mix right there. Yeah. It's like
is.
a fun creation mode instead of just, in the zone all the time.
Yes, I agree. So in true Marketing Should Be Fun fashion, got to open it up with our this or that. And I have a very interesting one today that I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm curious. And I also don't know what you're I don't know. I feel like sometimes we know what our responses are going to be, but I don't know what yours is going to be. So,
okay.
In life, would you or do you typically lead your life more with logic or with emotion?
Oh man, you really did have to go there today. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I would say this is going to be one of those annoying answers that you say both things.
Both.
Most of the time. No, just different order. Most of the time, my first instinct is to lead with emotion. That's where I feel a lot of my deep feelings or injustices or just
totally
the first ways I process something. But then I'm able to kind of bring logic in and put both of those together because I think they're both important. We're created with both of those things, the ability to feel and think both of those ways. So, but my first reaction is definitely usually more emotion filled, and then the logic can come in secondly, or sometimes heavily encouraged and influenced by my very logical husband, which I'm thankful for.
I was going to say he's the total opposite of that.
Yes.
That's awesome. Do you view that as a strength or a weakness or neutral, I guess?
Of my own, the way I approach it? I keep saying both today. That's frustrating to me. I think probably the honest answer is that I view it as a weakness, but I don't think it is a weakness. Yeah. I think we're quick to say emotions can definitely take us places that maybe aren't super wise, especially for me. But I also think that they inform a lot and kind of give us different understanding of a topic or help us consider things that maybe those who don't lead with emotion could plan for. So yeah, I'm going to call it a strength today.
There you go. That's fun. I think it is a strength. I mean, it's how you're wired. I agree. I think we're probably pretty similar in that vein. We're I'm not really the classic artist type where it's constantly feeling things necessarily, but my wife is much more in line with how your husband is wired with. She's a lot more logical than I am a lot of times, but it's interesting then. I don't know. It's even that word is kind of weird. I don't know. It's not I'm not logical necessarily, but I guess I just view life a little bit more artistically or emotionally. Yeah. And so, and then I don't know what this would be, but even in business, I am very comfortable leading with my gut. And so I don't know if that is more emotion.
I don't know if that's emotion because I feel the same way. Sometimes I'm this is the way it needs to be. I just know it. Right. I think that might just be thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
I feel like you are very able, you have a unique ability to be emotional and pragmatic at the same time. You don't have a problem letting emotion cloud decisions have to be made, at least in our business. But you don't have to, you don't leave it out of the whole conversation that there are emotions involved. So
yeah, the rest of my life is just falling apart. I can do it just here.
Sometimes that's true for people. Let's be real.
It is. Well, anyways, that was kind of a fun one. So
yeah, that was good.
Just fun to figure out how you're wired. But today we have a very fun topic that we're tackling. Yes. And we want to talk about sharing your personal convictions online, especially when it comes to things that are controversial or that just kind of have, strong opinions in one direction.
Strong opinions in our world today. What? That does not exist.
I know it's not like those exist. No way. We're all kind to each other all of the time. But I think we all could be kinder. But And so that is kind of a, initial preface to this is, even as we're talking about just the idea of controversial topics in general, I'm sure that Kelsey and myself will misstep somehow. So give us grace as we're trying to just tackle this in a quick way. But really today, we just wanted to give you just 5 things to consider, like before you post anything quote unquote controversial online. So Kelsey, initial thoughts before we kind of dive into those.
Yeah, I think this is very timely. I mean, who knows what will be happening in the world on the exact time of this episode launching, but right now where we're sitting is a lot of unrest in Ukraine, thoughts circling the internet on that. We've obviously lived through the past 2 years of 2020 and 2021 and health and vaccines and politics and racism and all the things. And I think that a lot of people, I know I have wondered how to handle XYZ on my social platform or in an email that I'm sending or whatever. And I think a lot of people are wondering that. And I think we feel the weight of it as creators and people who are building brands in the online space. And I think if we talked about it more, it wouldn't feel so awkward and nuanced if we just kind of felt the courage and freedom to say, like, I don't know, like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? So that's why I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, I remember the day that Russia invaded Ukraine and the war started. We were messaging back and forth, and like you very wisely were like, hey, we need to, talk about this with each of our clients that we manage social for. And just what I really appreciated about, that conversation too, is you were like, ultimately, like, we just need to give them the option. Like, there is not one right answer. There is not something that any of our clients have to do, but they do have to make a choice in one direction or the other of whether this is something that they feel like is something they need to address and talk about in some way or some fashion on their social platforms or, in whatever kind of content engines they have, or if it's just something that for, the time being, they want to just stay silent on. And for those both to be okay, ultimately, but to kind of give them directions they could go in. And we had clients do very different things. Like we had some share, very specific like prayers or different things like about what was going on. We've had some clients like talk about, different ways to actually like get involved and like give and donate to different things. And then we've had others who just haven't said anything specifically, related to what's happening or the war in Ukraine.
And I think we also had clients who chose to just change the direction of what they were talking about. So it may have looked like they were staying silent when in reality, they chose to like pull a post off the schedule or something that just maybe wouldn't have resonated or been a little bit of tone deafness going on. So yeah, you're right. We just did see a lot of reactions kind of across the board, but was really grateful that we gave them that space to just say like, this is a real thing. What do you want to do about it? Do you need to talk through it? That kind of thing.
Just today, I had to make this isn't like specifically addressing anything, but just today I had to make a copy change for one of our clients because in a podcast episode that we had just put out last week or something, in the copy, 3 weeks ago, I had written like, it's always great to talk to someone who has boots on the ground in this field.
Yeah.
And we had to go back and change that because like it just kind of came across like insensitive with everything, and so it's just like all of those little things that you kind of have to think about, and it can get like overwhelming or just kind of confusing when it comes to whether you should share those things or not, especially if it's something that you really do feel strongly about. Then it can feel even more, it's just like that pull between like, oh, I don't know if it's like wrong for me, for my brand to talk about this, but I also don't know if it's true to me to not talk about it. And it's like that constant tension that we've worked through with some of our clients as well. So should we go through our list?
Yeah, I think so. Would be helpful.
Okay. So here are 5 things to consider when posting about your personal convictions online. Kelsey, what is number 1?
Yeah. The first one is not feeling like you have to talk about something just because everyone else is. And I think this has been a good lesson for me, even to realize about other people. We can't assume, this is maybe even getting into another point down the road, but we can't assume that just because someone's not talking about it doesn't mean they don't care about it. There are so many ways you can be active in something or be educating yourself on something that's not going to be visible, like in your stories. We've got to get this narrative going in our culture that like not everything in life is on Instagram stories. And so it's okay that your whole personhood isn't formed just by like what you're showing there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big one, is just, it's okay if you need to take a minute and learn. Don't try to be an expert on something and like throw your weight around if you don't have the weight to throw. Learning and being silent is okay, in my opinion.
I think that's wise. It's honestly something I struggle with in a lot of ways, and kind of jumping back to that emotion kind of led aspect. Like, I don't think that necessarily when it comes to sharing things that you are like, that are personal convictions, I don't think it has to be completely logic driven. Like, that is, not who we are as humans necessarily. But I do think a lot of, times it is easy to get swept up in like the injustice of a moment, or, the frustration or confusion or any of that stuff. And sometimes I think it is okay to, share things out of that confusion and to be open about that frustration or that confusion. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily have to, be that, oh, everybody else is sharing about this, I am pressured to do the same. Like, it really has to be something that really is authentic to where we are at. And, authentic to what we want to share and want to talk about, rather than just, copying and pasting something somebody else has done, if it's not authentic to what we think or can say,
Yeah. And off of that too, maybe we just need to do a whole like internet ethics conversation. But I also have learned, like, maybe just take a minute and let it sit for a second before you hit the share button on certain posts, even going and looking at like the credibility and is this accurate? It's really easy when a big thing starts happening for there to just to be like information shared everywhere and not all of it's accurate. So sometimes it's okay to take a minute. You don't have to talk about it, or you might just be taking your time to like research what's even really happening instead of what you're just seeing on the social narrative.
Yeah. It's been really interesting for me, just on, since we're like just talking openly into it. It's super interesting to me, and has been helpful actually to have clients on a wide variety of like political spectrum and like just, I don't know, conviction spectrum in a lot of different ways. Because it's really interesting, because before I share anything, I always am like, it is very important to me that I'm not like hiding aspects of myself on, online or anything like that. But I always have been kind of like a little bit more tentative to share things, because I'm like, I want to share things in a way that is not offensive specifically to any of my clients. Like, that's kind of the lens that I have looked through the last couple of years, where it's like, I, kind of have gotten to know them. I know them very well, know kind of like where they stand on different things. And I want to make sure that the things that I'm sharing are encouraging or challenging or even like thought provoking, but not, harsh or mean towards any of the people who we work with. And that's actually just been a really good filter. And so you don't have to have clients to think that way, but it has just been kind of a helpful like little pause where I'm like, okay, is this actually helpful? Specifically thinking about this person or this person or this person, like when they see this, are they going to be frustrated with me, or just kind of like, okay, like that's interesting.
That's so wise. I love that. I feel like it kind of goes into our second point too. Maybe you can like flesh it out more, but our second point is that when you're considering posting about these controversial topics, does you sharing that line up with the narrative you want to tell with your life? How would you kind of explain that more for yourself?
Yeah, I feel like this point for me kind of came off. I've been listening to a lot of Donald Miller recently, and he just came out with a new book called Hero on a Mission, which I have not read yet, but just kind of listening to some of his talking points has, I don't know, it's just kind of connected some dots for me of things. Like, he talks a lot about how he has 3 stories that he wants to tell with his life. And like, he just has those very clearly laid out. And so I'm kind of, currently honing in some of the stories I want to tell with my life. But for me right now, like, a lot of that has to do with like encouraging people in who they are. A lot of it has to do with this business. And then, even like family and things like that. So for a lot of that, like, there are things that are important to me when it comes to the aspect of, I want to tell a story with my life of helping people come to terms with like who they are as a person and like live into that. So there are, things that I might talk about that help me kind of tell that story and are very intentional to me because I want people to see that narrative kind of playing out. Like I want that to be very clear. And there are some controversial topics that, come up that just don't fit into that story. And I think that narrative is just different for each of us. It's okay for us to, focus on the things that help us tell those stories with our lives, because if something isn't helping us tell that story, ultimately, like it might be something we can talk about, but in some ways it almost becomes a distraction from kind of that clear vision that we have for our life. And it kind of distracts us and makes us feel like we have to be, an expert on this, instead of just being an expert here or, staying consistent there. I don't know. Yeah. What would you say?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. That makes sense. I have a specific example of this, honestly, from even back when, everything in 2020 kind of started to blow up. And I'm not going to call conspiracy theories controversial topics, but we know there's a lot of different, mindsets or thoughts surrounding a lot of those topics. And I was having a really hard time with that. I mean, there was just a lot going on that I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I fall on this side of that, but I don't want to contribute to a spirit of fear and a spirit of confusion. So I think maybe that's even kind of, as you were talking, what came to mind for me, like that's the story I want to tell with my life is not one of cynicism and is not one of fear and is not one of division. So those are kind of filters that I try to put things through when I share things on social too. We can talk about some of those hard topics, but I think we can do it in a way that doesn't contribute to a story that we're not trying to tell.
Yeah. How did that like practically inform how you like showed up in those spaces?
Yeah. Well, I think the first way it kind of showed up was it helped me filter what I was even taking in, on social, because there's so many, sometimes we feel this pressure to share it once we see it somewhere else. And so if I wasn't even looking at it, it was really helping me kind of just stay in that own place of like peace and unity and I don't know, just hope, I guess I would say. So some of that was filtering what I was looking at. And then some of it was even just, instead of just clicking the share button and people assuming why I was sharing it, you can put some text on the screen or, just a little step like that can really help us say, hey, I'm thinking through this. What are your thoughts on it? Or just actually, this is a perfect segue into point 3 is to make a polarizing topic of conversation. And that's what I started doing, is asking questions and framing in a way that's like, hey, we can exist in this world together and we can even be friends and we can think different things about things. I mean, you and I have this very practical in our life too, that we don't fall on the same side of every conversation and we are still able to be really good friends and have great conversations. And
totally.
I would argue even like stretch ourselves more than if we just surrounded ourselves with people who were only posting or thinking the same things that we thought. So that was a lot of thoughts in a short amount of time.
I thought it was great. But that was a perfect segue into this one. I think that's very important. Like at the end of the day, like that's part of being human, is like talking and connecting. And, at some point that doesn't mean that, being human can't be, hey, I have this, strong belief. You have this strong belief. And, the kind of classic, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Like sometimes that happens. But that doesn't mean, that we can't be kind and talk and listen. And I feel like there are a lot of spaces that are getting much safer for that. And like that is being encouraged, but it's a simple thing to do. Like, just like you said, like to, rather than just kind of share something, it's okay to open that up for, this is a challenging perspective for me. Like, where are you at? Or just to like open things up to, whether you respond to all the things people say or not, it's just kind of creating that atmosphere of conversation that just makes it safer to disagree, but then also safer to, share different opinions and come to like a good conclusion in a lot of ways. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think if we even like zoom out a little from just like everything happening in the world right now and talk about an implication for maybe a listener's brand in general. I know when I was building my previous / current business on social, a lot of what I did was talk about like toxins in our products. And that can become a conversation where you can either be super judgmental or super invitational. So if you have a topic in your brand or your business or what you're sharing about, instead of saying like, you should throw all of this away right now, it is terrible if you use it, you can say, did you know blah, 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 and tell a story and invite them like, have you ever thought about trying this instead? And making those controversial topics. Some of them are very deeply rooted in who we are, but a lot of them are separating here is a fact and here is who you are as a person. And one of those does not equal the other. And kind of separating it out that way and saying, you matter and you're a human. And this conversation is not important as you being a human, but it's part of what I share about. And so that was really practical and helpful for me when I was building that way.
Yeah, that's a great example. I love it. What's number 4?
Don't make assumptions about your audience.
Let's go.
All right. Well, tell us why you love this one.
Yeah, it's important. So I think a lot of times we can assume that our audience has, because we've built it, like they will have the same convictions we do. And I think sometimes it makes it feel safer in a lot of ways to like from a brand perspective, safer to talk about, controversial things, especially in the early days, I feel like, of a brand, when, we've kind of, built this from the ground up, and it just kind of, it just feels like people, follow along because, they know who we are and all of those things. But in a lot of ways, you can't just make assumptions about where your audience is at, because if you do, you will likely assume wrongly and either come across, too harsh, or on the other side, come across too flippant of something else. And you'll end up like losing your audience in the long run, as people just don't connect with that. And if that is not, unless that is how you want your brand to show up and in line with, a specific goal that you have set for how you want to show up online, it can actually be harmful if we are kind of leading and building our brand from assumption. So what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the third point we were talking about too, about just making it a conversation. You can still share. I remember when we had a client who said, I'm struggling with how to stay true to myself. So kind of going back to that narrative you want to tell with your life and not isolate, my audience or polarize my audience. And I think it just comes back to making it conversational. You can share something that's important to you in a way that doesn't say, but you can't be here if you don't agree. Right. And I think if we just could start talking that way in a lot of areas of our life, we maybe would just be a lot better off in general.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like even, for you and I, like if like even on political spectrums, like we fall differently on, different topics. And it's like, I feel like I'm at a place in my life that like, I'm not going to exist in spaces that are like critical of, how I want to show up as a person and like the topics that I want to support. And so like if I, for example, like connect with someone and enjoy, this aspect of their brand, and then all of a sudden they make an assumption that I'm in this audience and I also believe this, and this, I'm not going to stay in that space because it causes unnecessary frustration for me, and it just takes brain space that is not worth it. And so it's with that, like as we are showing up, it's the same thing for me. Like I have to, be very intentional of, I want to support a wide variety of people through my business. I love it. It's part of what brings me life in this business. And so that has to inform the ways that I show up online. If I make assumptions, then I will end up kind of cornering myself in one way or the other.
This is kind of off script, but that's how podcasts work. We also have to understand that like, we're not going to be for everybody. So you also can't show up in your digital spaces or just in life and expect everything I say is going to land perfectly for everyone. And that's, I think, where it comes back to deciding what narrative you're telling and deciding, your hills to die on and the things that are your personal convictions. You can have those and not have to share them on social. But then there's also times where you may feel like you need to, and you're understanding that like, this may isolate, a certain type of part of my audience or just change how they think about me. But you can't live for your audience either. So there's the tension and like just lots of dynamics that have to exist there, but we will never make everyone happy. And so that's not the goal of this episode or just our platforms in general.
Totally. I'm glad you brought that up too, because I didn't cover this in the second one too, but with those aspects of like the narrative that we want to tell with our life, that doesn't make it easier to then talk about the issues that fall into that narrative. There are still things that fall into, hey, I want to, stake a claim on, this belief or whatever it is. And with that, like, it comes with the expectation that there will be people that disagree with you on that thing. And that's why it's intentional, or that's why you have to be intentional about doing that carefully and doing that like in line with a purpose. But when it comes down to it, then you have to be willing to hit post. You have to be willing to, say those things, and in those ways show up very, direct and very kind of open, in a way that does kind of help you fulfill that purpose and requires that courage and that bravery on those things. So good point.
So much of what we do on social is determined and affected by just like the character we have in our day-to-day life. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
Yeah. All right.
Man, I feel like we kind of talked about our last point. It just all kind of happened within our bullet points. But I mean, just to say it, point blank, if you choose to talk about a polarizing topic, realize you may lose, the other part of your audience. And we talked about this in just the way we show up for conversations, the way we position the conversation, and even the wording. How do you think this impacts our clients, especially? It's one thing to talk about polarizing topics on a personal page, but when you're representing a brand, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give just a very practical example. Is we had, very top of the conversation, you mentioned vaccines, politics, all that stuff. We had like one client that we saw who was very open about their perspective of vaccines, and ended up like we saw in the season of their brand that they weren't talking about that topic. There was like more growth on social, and in the kind of seasons where that would ramp up, there was less growth and even like negative impact on their social. And so I think that's a very practical example, like when it comes to our clients, of there is kind of very clear, you're gonna lose some people who disagree with you if you end up talking about something that is controversial. And like I just said, sometimes if that's on purpose, that can be okay. And, sometimes also, if it is something that you feel like is just a truth that the people following you should generally kind of fall under that same category, then again, that's okay. But if it's an unnecessary kind of loss, what you end up doing, especially if you are a business, like you end up losing potential customers, you end up losing people who like would want to work with you in this capacity, but end up, not kind of walking down that road, or not feeling like they would vibe with you over like an unnecessary disagreement as well. So that's a practical example, I'd say.
Yeah. I would even take that point a step further and say, if you choose to talk about a polarizing topic in certain ways, realize you may lose part of your audience, because I've seen, I follow people, if we're just going to stay on the vaccine topic, who talk about that in so many different ways. And I've seen people do it, like we've been talking about this whole episode, in invitational, thought-provoking ways, and people who do it in judgmental, like cynical, push people away type of ways. And so I think those are the conversation differences I'm seeing a lot of with brands right now that are working well and that are not working.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, that's what earns an unfollow or like stay followed is like, if I'm going to exist in this space, like ultimately, I just don't want to end up being frustrated because, and so like, if it's a space that is just consistently frustrating for me as someone who like takes a different viewpoint on anything, then it's just not worth my time to stay there. And so, but on the other hand, like if you think differently and are showing up in that invitational way, then it absolutely like can still be worth my time, because it is challenging my thinking, or it's, expanding my perspective, or, it's funny or whatever.
Yeah. Or just earning your respect as like, hey, I see that you are trying to communicate this with grace and, integrity. And that means a lot too.
All right. Well, Kelsey, that's our list of 5. How would you close out the episode?
I don't feel like we really gave you like black and white answers, but I hope that just what we talked about gave you food for thought, maybe helped you just feel more confident in one way or the other. And ultimately, I just hope that we can all approach people that we are following and listening to, and also the way that we are showing up and being listened to with just a measure of grace and understanding, like, we're all human. We're all trying to figure it out. Most of the time, the arguments we have online maybe wouldn't happen if we were face to face, and being able to share even more of those nuances and just, things that come up when you can talk face to face. So try to remember there's always people behind the brand, and be a person behind a brand. And I think that will take us really far in this conversation.
There you have it. Well, thanks for listening to today's episode of Marketing Should Be Fun. See you back here next time.